For 10,000 years, the rain never stopped falling on North America, from the endless mists of the Pacific Northwest to the wall of water storms of the Great Plains. Indigenous peoples faced conditions that would break a modern camper in days. They had no Gore-Tex, no waterproof tents, no synthetic fabrics. Here's how they stayed dry for weeks in endless rain while we can barely survive a drizzle without complaining. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Okay, tonight it's the Great Plains, maybe around 1700 or so. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes open to the sound of water, not a gentle patter. This is the kind of rain that sounds like someone upended a bucket directly over your head, except the bucket never empties. It just keeps going. You're inside a teepee on the plains somewhere in what will eventually be called South Dakota, and the first thing you notice is that you're warm, dry. The air smells like wood smoke and leather, that particular golden, earthy scent of smoked buckskin that will stay with you your entire life. Your name is White Bird, Zintkala Ska in your people's language. You're 18 winters old, and this is the third day of the storm. Not like the storms you're probably thinking of. This one has been unrelenting since before dawn 2 days ago. The sky opened up and simply forgot to close. Rivers of water cascade down the sides of your family's teepee, and somewhere outside you can hear the horses stamping nervously in the makeshift corral your brothers constructed from cottonwood branches. You sit up from your buffalo robe, the fur still warm from your body. Around you, the rest of your family stirs. Your grandmother, tall pine woman, is already awake, her weathered hands working a piece of leather in the low light filtering through the smoke hole above. She's been awake for hours. She always is. Now, here's the thing about this moment that would probably blow your modern mind. Everything around you, every single item that's keeping the rain from turning you into a shivering, miserable mess, was made from materials that came directly from the land. Not ordered from Amazon, not purchased at REI. Harvested, processed, and constructed by the hands of your people using methods passed down for thousands of years. And it all works better than most things we can buy today. Let's start with what you're wearing, because this is where it gets interesting. Your dress is made from deer hide, but not the stiff, hard leather you might be picturing. This material is softer than your favourite cotton t-shirt, more flexible than yoga pants, and here's the wild part, it will dry completely in about 30 minutes even if you just walked through a river. The secret is something called brain tanning. Yeah, you heard that right, brains. Every animal, it turns out, has exactly enough brain matter to tan its own hide. The Lakota and other plains peoples figured this out thousands of years ago, and it's one of those discoveries that makes you wonder what else our ancestors knew that we've forgotten. Here's how it works. When your people bring down a deer, they save everything. Everything. The meat goes to food. The sinew becomes thread. The bones become tools. And the brain gets carefully removed and stored for later. To prepare a hide, first you scrape off all the flesh and fat from the inside. This is hard physical work that your grandmother has been doing since she was younger than you. She uses a tool made from a sharpened elk leg bone, the edge worn smooth from decades of use. The hide gets stretched on a wooden frame, and then comes the messy part. The brain is mashed into warm water until it forms a thick sort of pinkish emulsion. Picture a smoothie you would absolutely never drink. This mixture gets worked into the hide, massaged into every fibre, rubbed and squeezed until the whole thing is saturated. The fats in the brain, they're the key. They separate the protein fibres in the leather, make them loose and flexible instead of hard and rigid. But there's a problem. Brain-tanned leather on its own has a fatal flaw. If it gets wet, it dries stiff as cardboard, completely useless. Your beautiful soft dress would turn into something you could use as a cutting board. So your ancestors figured out a second step: smoking. After the hide is brain-tanned and dried soft, it gets placed over a smouldering fire. Not a hot fire, a smoky fire, usually made from rotted cottonwood or willow, woods that produce thick, dense smoke without much heat. The hide hangs there for hours, sometimes days, soaking up the smoke until it turns that beautiful golden brown colour that makes your dress look like it's made of autumn leaves. The smoke does something almost magical to the leather. The formaldehyde compounds, because that's what's in wood smoke, they bond with the protein fibres permanently. They essentially fix the structure of the leather in its soft state forever. After that, it doesn't matter how many times your dress gets soaked in a rainstorm. It will always dry soft. Always. Your grandmother has garments she's worn for 40 years that are still as supple as the day they were finished. This is the first secret your people understand about surviving the rain. You don't try to stay perfectly dry. That's impossible. What you do is create materials that can get wet without being destroyed by the wetness. Your dress can soak through completely, and within an hour by the fire, it's dry and comfortable again. Unlike the wool blankets the traders try to sell, which stay wet for days and smell like death warmed over. Now, you might be wondering about that teepee over your head, the one that's keeping gallons of water from falling directly on your sleeping family. Look at it for a second. Really look at it. From outside, it looks pretty simple. A cone shape, some poles, a covering made of hide stitched together. But that simplicity is deceiving. This is one of the most sophisticated pieces of engineering any pre-industrial people ever created, and the rain is proving it right now. The cone shape, that's the first genius part. Rain doesn't sit on a cone. It can't. Every drop that lands on your teepee immediately starts sliding downward, following gravity, rolling along the slope until it reaches the ground. There's no flat surface for water to collect, no ridge for it to pool in, no weak point for it to exploit. Modern tents, they have all kinds of corners and creases and flat spots where water gathers and seeps through. Your teepee has none of that. The engineering is so clean, so simple that it just works every time, but the covering is where it really gets clever. Your family's teepee is made from about 14 buffalo hides, carefully selected and stitched together to form a single semicircular sheet. The stitching was done by your mother and aunts over the course of several weeks using sinew thread made from the tendons of deer. Here's the beautiful trick. Sinew, when it gets wet, swells slightly. The threads expand, which means that when the rain first starts falling, hitting those seams where the hides are joined together, the sinew actually tightens. The seams seal themselves. The harder it rains, the more waterproof your teepee becomes. Think about that for a second. Your ancestors created a self-sealing roof using only animal parts. No adhesives, no synthetic compounds, just the natural properties of sinew doing exactly what sinew was designed to do. Outside, the storm shows no signs of letting up. Your younger brother, Running Fox, he's maybe 12 winters old, pulls back the door flap and peeks outside. Rain blows into his face and he jerks back, laughing. He was supposed to check on the horses, but he's clearly not too enthusiastic about it. Your mother gives him a look. The look. You know the one. Every mother in every culture throughout all of human history has perfected that exact expression. Running Fox sighs dramatically and reaches for his outer garment. This is different from his regular clothes. It's shorter, made specifically for bad weather. The shoulders are extra thick, almost double-layered with smoked leather, and the whole thing has been treated with a coating of animal fat that your mother rendered down from a buffalo last fall. The fat doesn't make it waterproof exactly, but it makes the water bead up and roll off rather than soaking in immediately. He pulls on his moccasins, which your grandmother made last moon cycle. They're going to get wet the second he steps outside. Everyone knows this. The moccasins don't even pretend to be waterproof, and that's the point. See, your people figured out something that modern outdoor gear manufacturers still haven't quite accepted. If you're going to be moving around in wet conditions, your feet are going to get wet, period. There's no stopping it. So instead of fighting the inevitable, you design footwear that can handle being wet. Running Fox's moccasins are made from the same smoked deer leather as everything else. Soft, flexible, designed to mold to his feet. They'll soak through in minutes out there in the rain, but when he comes back inside, he'll pull them off, set them near the fire, and they'll be completely dry in less than half an hour. Meanwhile, a pair of European leather boots would take all night by the fire and still be damp inside the next morning. Your people don't fight the water. They work with it, adapt to it, understand that getting wet isn't the problem. Staying wet is. This philosophy runs through everything. The teepee doesn't try to keep out every drop of moisture. It manages the moisture, directs it, channels it harmlessly to the ground. Your clothes don't create an impermeable barrier between you and the elements. They breathe, they flex, they get wet, and then they dry fast. It's such a different way of thinking from what you're probably used to. We spend billions of dollars trying to create perfect seals, total waterproofing, absolute protection from the elements, and your ancestors just looked at the rain and said, okay, we're going to get a little wet. How do we make that not matter? Your grandmother looks up from her work, catches your eye, and nods toward the fire. Time for the morning meal. Even with the storm raging outside, life continues. Food needs to be prepared, children need to be fed, the fire needs to be maintained. That fire, by the way, is another miracle you've probably been taking for granted. It's been burning for 3 days straight. Through the entire storm, smoke rises from it in a thin stream that seems to know exactly where to go, spiraling upward through the smoke hole at the top of the teepee. The hole is positioned slightly off-center, and there are 2 flaps at the top that can be adjusted with long poles to control the airflow. Right now, they're set to create just enough draft to pull the smoke out without letting the rain in. Your uncle, Grey Horse, he's the one who built this teepee 10 years ago, and he set it up facing east, as your people always do. That puts the doorway away from the prevailing westerly winds, which means the rain is beating against the back of the structure rather than trying to push through the entrance. The entrance, by the way, is covered with a separate hide that hangs like a door flap. During the storm, it's been weighted down at the bottom with stones to keep it from flapping open in the wind. Right now, Running Fox is holding it aside just enough to slip through, letting in a spray of mist before the leather falls back into place behind him. You watch the fire crackle, listen to the rain hammering overhead, feel the warmth wrapping around you like a blanket. Somewhere outside, your brother is splashing through puddles to check on horses that are probably wishing they could fit inside the teepee too. And in here, you're dry, warm, safe. Not because of modern technology or manufactured materials or anything you bought, but because of knowledge, wisdom passed down through hundreds of generations, an understanding of the natural world so deep that your people can take raw materials from the land and create shelter that outperforms anything money can buy. Your grandmother says something in Lakota, her voice carrying that particular soft roughness of someone who has lived through many winters. She's talking about the rain, about how it's good for the grass, good for the buffalo herds that will come through in the summer. She's not worried about the storm. Neither is anyone else, because this is just weather, and your people have been handling weather since long before anyone thought to call it a challenge. The real secrets of how they do it, the engineering inside this teepee that you haven't even noticed yet, the clever systems your ancestors built into this place to handle any water that might seep through, those are about to become a lot more interesting, because something is happening at the top of the teepee where the poles all come together. A drop of water is forming, and you're about to learn what your grandmother built to catch it. But first, your mother hands you a bowl of warm stew, dried buffalo meat that's been simmering with wild turnips since yesterday. The smell rises up and mingles with the wood smoke and the leather scent and the faint mineral freshness of rain seeping in from outside. You wrap your hands around the bowl, feel its warmth radiating into your palms. Outside, the storm continues its assault. Inside, your family eats breakfast together, the same way families have been doing in this exact spot for longer than anyone can remember. Your grandmother is watching you. There's something in her eyes, that particular look elders get when they're about to teach you something you didn't know you needed to learn. She glances up at the top of the teepee, where those poles come together in a complex arrangement that suddenly seems a lot more interesting than it did a moment ago. Running Fox bursts back through the door flap, absolutely soaked, grinning like the storm is the best thing that ever happened to him. Water streams off his shoulders, pools around his moccasins, and he's already pulling off his outer garment to hang by the fire. His moccasins, predictably, are dripping, but he doesn't look concerned. Nobody does. Because your people know something about water that took modern hikers decades to figure out. It's not about avoiding the wet, it's about recovering from it, fast. And everything in this teepee, every single material and system and solution was designed with that one principle in mind. Your grandmother sets down the piece of leather she's been working on. She moves slowly these days, her joints stiff from decades of hard work, but there's nothing slow about her mind. She's watching the top of the teepee, where about 15 lodgepole pine poles all come together in a tight bundle, wrapped with rawhide cord to keep them from shifting. And there it is, a single drop of water glistening in the firelight, hanging from one of the poles where it touches the outer covering. You've seen this before, but you never really thought about it. Rain on the outside, sometimes a little moisture finds its way in. Where the poles press against the hide, where condensation forms on cold mornings, water happens. It's inevitable. The drop falls. But it doesn't land on you. It doesn't land on the fire. It doesn't land on the buffalo robes or the dried meat hanging from a crossbeam or any of the dozens of items your family has stored inside this space. Instead, it lands on something you've been looking at your whole life without really seeing. There's a second wall inside your teepee. Not all the way around, not all the way up. Just a vertical band of lighter hide that circles the interior, attached to the poles at about the height of a standing person's shoulders. Your people call it the ozan. Some of the tribes to the north call it something different, but the idea is the same everywhere. Your grandmother catches your eye and gestures upward with her chin, the Lakota way of pointing. Watch, she's saying. Learn. Another drop forms, falls, hits the ozan, and instead of soaking through, instead of dripping straight down onto the ground where people sleep, the water slides along the angled surface of the inner lining, rolls downward toward the bottom edge, and drips off onto the bare earth at the very edge of the teepee's floor, right against the outer wall where nobody sits and nothing important gets stored. It's so simple you could cry. This second wall, this liner, it catches everything. Condensation that forms on the inside of the outer hide when cold rain hits warm leather. Occasional drips from the seams, any moisture that makes it past the outer defenses. The ozan intercepts all of it and redirects it harmlessly away from the living space. Your grandmother is nodding now, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She knows you're finally seeing what she's known for 60 years. The teepee isn't just a tent, it's a machine, a carefully designed system where every piece works together, and the ozan does more than just catch water. Feel the air in here. Really pay attention to it. The fire is burning, putting out heat, but the air isn't stuffy. It's not too hot near the flames and freezing cold against the walls. The temperature is somehow comfortable everywhere. That's the ozan too. The gap between the inner lining and the outer covering, it's about the width of your hand, maybe a little more. That gap creates a channel that runs all the way around the teepee, from the ground to about 6 feet up. Cold air sneaks in under the edge of the outer covering, enters this channel, and immediately starts rising as it warms from the fire. It flows upward through the gap, pulling smoke from the fire along with it, and exits through the smoke hole at the top. The whole thing works like a chimney, except the chimney wraps around you in a circle. Fresh air comes in low, stale air goes out high, and the smoke follows the current instead of filling up the living space. Meanwhile, that layer of trapped air between the ozan and the outer hide, it's insulation, same principle as double-paned windows, except your people figured it out a few thousand years before glass was even an option. In winter, that air gap keeps the cold from the outer walls from reaching the warm interior. In summer, it keeps the sun-baked hide from turning your home into an oven. Your grandmother reaches up and adjusts the ozan slightly where it attaches to a pole near her. The liner is painted with images, stories from your family's history. A horse raid from before you were born, the winter your grandfather counted coup on a crow warrior. Geometric patterns in red and yellow and black that have meaning you're still learning to read. These paintings aren't just decoration. The pigments, mixed with animal fat and worked into the leather, they add another layer of water resistance. Your grandmother painted most of these herself when she was younger than you are now. The colours have faded over the years, but they still tell the story of your family's place in the world. Running Fox is by the fire now, his wet outer garment steaming gently as it hangs from a drying pole your father set up for exactly this purpose. The pole angles out over the flames, close enough to catch the heat, but not so close that anything might catch fire. His moccasins sit on a flat stone near the fire's edge, already starting to lose that dark, soaked-through look. Your mother is tending the stew, adding more water from a bladder bag that hangs from one of the teepee poles. The bag is made from the stomach of a buffalo, cleaned and dried and made watertight with a combination of sinew stitching and pine pitch. It holds about 2 gallons and has been hanging there since before the storm started, keeping your water supply clean and ready. Everything has a place, everything has a purpose, nothing is wasted, nothing is accidental. Outside, the rain seems to be picking up. You can hear it hammering harder now, a sound like thousands of tiny drum beats on the hide above you. The outer covering is taking a beating, but it's taking it without complaint. Water sheets down the conical surface, following gravity, finding the ground. Your Uncle Grey Horse looks up from the arrow he's been straightening by the fire. He's a quiet man, doesn't say much, but he built this teepee with his own hands and he knows every inch of it. He listens to the rain for a moment, then goes back to his work, not worried. The poles that hold up this whole structure, they're lodgepole pine. Your people trade for them, sometimes travelling hundreds of miles to get the really good ones from the mountains to the west. Each pole is maybe 15 feet long, straight as an arrow, light enough for one person to carry, but strong enough to support the weight of a dozen buffalo hides. There are about 17 poles in this teepee, depending on how you count. The first 3 or 4 get tied together at the top and spread at the bottom to form a tripod. Then the rest get added one by one, leaning into the crotch where those first poles meet, each one carefully positioned to create an even cone shape all the way around. The whole frame goes up in maybe 20 minutes when your family is practiced at it, which they are. Your people move camp multiple times a year following the buffalo herds, and breaking down and setting up a teepee is just part of life. The women handle most of it, actually. The covering is their responsibility, their property. Your mother could probably set up this entire structure blindfolded. Once the frame is up, the covering goes on. It gets raised using a special lifting pole and then wrapped around the cone, pinned at the front with wooden stakes that look a little like giant clothespins. The whole thing can be completed in maybe an hour, maybe less if everybody helps. And when it's done, you have a home that can withstand winds strong enough to knock down wooden buildings, that sheds rain like water off a duck's back, that stays warm in blizzards and cool in heat waves, that can be moved across hundreds of miles of open prairie as easily as you pack a suitcase. The traders who pass through sometimes, the French and the occasional English, they look at your teepees and see primitive tents, they see animal skins propped on sticks. They don't understand what they're looking at, because what they're looking at is the result of thousands of years of engineering, trial and error, refinement, generations of smart people solving problems and passing those solutions on to their children. The cone shape wasn't an accident. It's the most aerodynamic form possible, which matters when you live on a prairie where the wind never stops blowing. Storms that would tear apart a square cabin just flow around the smooth surface of a teepee. The wind finds no edges to grab, no flat surfaces to push against. It just slides past. The tilted design wasn't an accident either. Your teepee isn't a perfect cone. It's slightly tilted toward the east, toward the doorway, which means the back of the structure, the side facing the prevailing winds, is steeper, more streamlined. The west wind hits that steep angle and gets deflected upward instead of pushing against the hide. Even the smoke flaps at the top, those adjustable ear-like extensions that stick up above the smoke hole, they're engineered. Your grandmother can read the wind by how the smoke moves, and she adjusts those flaps with long poles to make sure the draft always pulls the right direction. It's like having adjustable ventilation in a world where that shouldn't be possible. The fire pops, sending a tiny shower of sparks upward. They spiral in the rising current of warm air, orange against the dim interior, and disappear through the smoke hole before they can land on anything flammable. The smoke follows them, a thin grey stream that never seems to fill the space or make your eyes water. Your grandmother is watching you again. She knows you're thinking about all of this, really thinking about it for maybe the first time. She's been waiting for this moment, the way all grandmothers wait for the moment when their grandchildren stop taking things for granted. She speaks your name in Lakota, then she says something that roughly translates to, "The house is alive. It breathes." You look around with new eyes, the air flowing in under the edges, rising through the gap behind the ozan, carrying smoke upward and out, the heat from the fire radiating outward but held in by the insulating layer of trapped air, the moisture being caught and redirected, managed, controlled. She's right. The teepee is breathing, inhaling cold air at the bottom, exhaling warm air at the top, a living system in constant motion. Your mother ladles stew into bowls for the rest of the family. Your father takes his portion with a nod of thanks. He's been mending a bridle near the door, keeping an eye on the storm through the gap in the door flap. The horses are fine, Running Fox reported. Wet and unhappy, but fine. The rain shows no sign of stopping. It doesn't matter. In here, you could wait out a storm that lasted a month. You have food stored in rawhide containers that keep out moisture. You have water in that buffalo stomach bladder. You have fuel for the fire stacked against the inner wall, protected by the ozan from any drips. You have warm clothes that will dry in minutes if they get wet. Your people have been living like this for longer than anyone can count, long before the horse arrived on the plains, long before the first Europeans set foot on this land, long before written history started keeping track, and in all that time, through countless storms and blizzards and torrential downpours, the teepee has kept them alive, warm, dry, safe. The water drop that started this whole train of thought has been followed by maybe a dozen others. Each one falls, hits the ozan, slides harmlessly to the edge, and drips onto bare earth where it soaks in without bothering anyone. The system works. It's been working for thousands of years. Your grandmother catches your eye one more time, and there's something in her expression that seems almost amused, as if she's thinking about how long it took you to notice what's been right in front of you since the day you were born. But there's pride there too, because now you know, now you see. And someday, when you have your own teepee, your own family, your own grandchildren to teach, you'll know how to build an ozan that catches every drop, how to position the poles so the wind never wins, how to make a home that breathes, the storm continues outside, the fire crackles, your family eats breakfast together, dry and warm, while the world turns to water all around them. Somewhere to the east, in the direction the door faces, the sun is trying to rise behind all those clouds. It won't succeed today. Maybe not tomorrow either. That's okay. You're not going anywhere until the rain stops. And even then, maybe you'll wait another day. Let the ground dry out a little. Let the rivers go down. There's no rush, because right now, right here, you have everything you need. Food, water, warmth, family, and a house that breathes. Your little sister, Laughing Water, she's only 6 winters old, and she's been watching this whole exchange between you and your grandmother with wide eyes. She doesn't understand yet. She just knows the teepee keeps her dry when it rains. The why hasn't occurred to her. It will. Give her another 10 winters and she'll be sitting where you are now, suddenly seeing the ozan for what it really is. Running Fox is pulling on his moccasins again, testing them to see if they've dried enough. They're still damp, but he's impatient. He wants to go back outside, splash in puddles. Boys his age are like that. The storm is an adventure to him. Your father looks up from his bridle mending and catches your mother's eye. Some silent communication passes between them, the kind that only happens after 20 years together. She nods slightly. He goes back to his work. The teepee holds all of you. 3 generations, 7 people, plus enough gear to survive on the open plains for months, and somehow it never feels crowded. The circular floor plan gives everyone their own space while keeping the family together. Storage happens in the gaps. Dried meat hangs from rawhide cords strung between poles. Parflesh containers stack along the walls behind the ozan where they stay dry. Weapons hang within reach. Clothing gets rolled and organized according to a system your mother could explain in her sleep. Every family does it differently. Walk into 10 different teepees and you'll see 10 different arrangements. But they all work. The rain continues its steady drumming. Your grandmother picks up her leather work again, fingers moving automatically in patterns she learned before you were born. None of this would be possible without the ozan keeping everything dry. The damp would ruin the leather, warp the wood, spoil the food. But with that simple second wall catching every stray drop, your home stays dry inside as if the sun were shining. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls across the prairie. The storm isn't finished with you yet. That's all right. You're ready for it. Your grandmother's voice cuts through the sound of rain. She's not speaking to anyone in particular, just talking the way old people do sometimes, half to the room and half to the memories inside her head. She's telling a story about her grandmother, about a journey her family took many generations ago, back before your people had horses, back when they walked everywhere and dogs pulled the travois loaded with hides and poles, a journey east toward the rising sun, to trade with the peoples who lived in the great forests. Those people, she says, they don't live in teepees. They live in houses made of bark, long houses, big enough for a whole clan, all the families together under one roof. You've heard pieces of this story before, but tonight, with the rain hammering down and the fire crackling low, it feels different, like the storm outside has created a bubble where stories can breathe. Her grandmother walked for many weeks, your grandmother says, through the tall grass, past the rivers that flow toward the morning sun, into forests so thick you couldn't see the sky, and there she found villages where the houses stretched longer than 10 teepees placed end to end. Houses that never moved, built from the bones of the forest itself. She pauses, her old eyes reflecting the firelight. You've never seen one of these houses, neither has she, not in person, but her grandmother described them so many times with such detail that the image has been passed down like a precious bead through 4 generations of women. "Let me tell you about those houses," she says. "Let me tell you about the people of the Longhouse. Far to the east, in lands your people call the rising sun country, the climate is different, wetter. The rains there don't come in sudden prairie storms that blow through and move on. They settle in, days of grey sky and constant drizzle, fog that hangs in the valleys like smoke, a dampness that seeps into everything if you let it. The people who live there, the Haudenosaunee, the ones the traders call Iroquois, they figured out their own way to stay dry, and it's completely different from anything your people ever built. Imagine a frame made of bent saplings, your grandmother says, young trees, flexible, pulled down and tied to form an arch like a rainbow frozen in wood. Now imagine dozens of these arches, placed in a row, maybe 20 feet apart, connected by long poles running the length of the structure. A tunnel of wood stretching maybe 100 feet, maybe 200, some of them even longer. That's just the bones. The skin is bark, not the thin, papery bark of the birch tree, though they use that too for smaller things. The main covering comes from elm trees, stripped off in great sheets during the spring, when the sap runs high and the bark peels away from the wood like skin from a peach. These elm bark sheets, they're huge, bigger than a buffalo hide, and they get pressed flat under heavy stones, dried until they're stiff as boards, then attached to the wooden frame in overlapping layers like shingles on a roof. Think about that for a second. Shingles, the same principle that keeps water off the wooden cabins the traders build. Each piece overlaps the one below it, so water hitting the top sheet runs down onto the next sheet and the next and the next, always finding its way downward, never getting a chance to seep through. The people of the Longhouse figured this out thousands of years ago, long before anyone thought to write it down. Your grandmother's voice has taken on a rhythm, almost like a song. She's not just telling a story anymore, she's teaching the way her grandmother taught her and her grandmother before that. Inside the Longhouse, she says, families live in rows along the walls. Each family has their own section, their own fire pit in the centre aisle, their own sleeping platforms raised off the ground. A single house might hold 20 families, 50 families, 100 people or more, all related through their mothers, all sharing one roof that never leaks. Never leaks. In a climate where it rains more days than it doesn't, where fog rolls in from the lakes and settles on everything, where dampness is a fact of life. How do they manage it? The overlapping bark, that's the first layer of defense. Water runs down, always down, following gravity from sheet to sheet until it reaches the ground. No pooling, no soaking in, just a constant shedding like a duck's feathers. But the builders of the longhouse knew something else too. They knew that one layer of bark, no matter how well arranged, wouldn't be enough. So they built 2 layers. An outer layer of bark running vertically up and down, an inner layer running horizontally side to side. The 2 layers together create a shell so tight that water can't find a way through. If it somehow gets past the outer layer, the inner layer catches it. If it somehow gets past both, there's a gap between them where it can drain away. The roof is the same principle, but curved, arched like the back of a sleeping cat. Rain hits that curve and slides, can't find a foothold, can't gather into puddles, just rolls off and falls to the ground. Your grandmother pauses, reaches for a drink of water from the bladder bag hanging nearby. The fire has burned down a little, and Running Fox leans forward to add a few more sticks. Sparks spiral upward into the smoke hole, orange against the grey light filtering down from above. The people of the longhouse, your grandmother continues, they have smoke holes too, running the whole length of the roof, right along the top, a gap to let the smoke out from all those cooking fires below. But what happens when it rains? Doesn't the water pour right in? This is where it gets clever. They build panels, movable pieces of bark on hinged frames that can slide over the smoke holes when the weather turns bad. Each family has a long pole they use to push their section of covering into place. When the rain starts, you'll see people all down the length of the longhouse, reaching up with their poles, sliding those bark panels until only a small gap remains, just enough for smoke to escape, too narrow for the rain to enter. Your mother makes a small sound of appreciation. She's been listening too, even while her hands stay busy sorting through a basket of dried berries. The solution is elegant, simple materials doing complicated work. And the floor, your grandmother says. The floor of the longhouse is just packed earth, same as ours, but they don't leave it bare. They cover it with layers of dried grass, woven mats made from reeds, animal hides for the sleeping areas. Even if water somehow got inside, even if the whole system failed and rain came pouring through, it would soak into that earthen floor without touching anyone's bed. The sleeping platforms where people actually rest their bodies, those are raised, built up on wooden frames maybe a foot or 2 above the ground. Water falls down, people sleep up, the math works out. Your father has stopped working on his bridle. He's listening now too, his dark eyes, thoughtful. He's a practical man, your father. He appreciates good design. The bark they use, your grandmother says, it lasts for years, decades even, if the tree was healthy and the stripping was done properly. But nothing lasts forever. Pieces wear out, get damaged by woodpeckers or storms or just the slow work of time. So, the builders made it easy to fix. Each bark sheet is held in place by poles on the outside, pressing it flat against the inner frame. If a sheet starts to leak, you don't have to tear down the whole wall. You just loosen those outer poles, slide out the bad piece, slide in a new one. 10 minutes of work, maybe less, and you're watertight again. Compare that to fixing a teepee cover, which involves sewing and stretching and making sure the new piece matches the old ones perfectly. The longhouse is almost like it was designed to be repaired, built with maintenance in mind. Your grandmother takes another drink of water. The rain outside seems to be easing slightly, the hammering sound softening to something closer to a steady whisper. Or maybe you've just gotten so used to it that you don't notice anymore. There's another trick, she says, something her grandmother told her about the way the longhouse handles the seams, the places where bark sheets come together. Those are the weak points. Water always looks for seams. The Haudenosaunee seal them with a mixture of resin and charcoal, pitch from pine trees, boiled down and mixed with black powder until it becomes a thick paste. This paste gets spread along every seam, filling the gaps, creating a seal that flexes slightly without cracking. When rain hits those seams, it finds nothing but smooth, sticky resin that sheds water like wax. The smell of pine pitch, your grandmother says. That's what her grandmother remembered most about those longhouses, that sharp, clean scent mixed with wood smoke and cooking food and the particular smell of dozens of people living together. Your little sister, Laughing Water, has fallen asleep against your mother's side, her small hand still clutching a strip of dried meat she never finished eating. The story has gone on long enough to carry her into dreams. But you're still awake, still thinking about those houses made of bark stretching through the forests of the east like great wooden whales resting on the land. Different people, different place, different materials, but the same problem. Rain, water, the endless challenge of staying dry in a world that keeps trying to soak you. Your grandmother seems to read your thoughts. She reaches out and touches the ozan beside her, that inner lining you finally learned to see this morning. Different answers, she says. Same question. How do we live with the rain instead of fighting it? The teepee breathes, it flexes in the wind, it can be packed up and moved 1,000 miles, but it needs the right kind of hides, the right kind of poles, the right kind of open land, where a cone shape makes sense. The longhouse stands firm. It holds whole clans together through generations. It can be repaired piece by piece as time wears it down, but it needs forests full of elm and birch, and it needs people who plan to stay in one place long enough to make permanent building worth the effort. Neither is better than the other. They're just different solutions to the same eternal problem. Your grandmother lets go of the ozan and settles back against her backrest, a frame of willow branches padded with buffalo hide that keeps her old spine comfortable during long days inside. The rain, she says softly, falls on everyone. The question is never how to make it stop. The question is how to keep living while it falls. Outside, the storm continues, but it feels different now, less like an enemy beating against the walls and more like an old companion, one your people have been walking beside for 10,000 years. The fire pops and settles, your mother adjusts Laughing Water's blanket. Your father goes back to his bridal work. Running Fox is finally pulling on his outer garment again, ready to brave the weather. And you sit there in the warm, dry centre of your family's teepee, thinking about the people of the longhouse, hundreds of miles to the east, sitting in their own warm, dry homes, listening to the same rain falling on different bark, same storm, same sky, different roofs, all of them holding. Your grandmother isn't finished, though. There's more she wants you to know about those eastern people and their bark houses. The entrance, she says. Her eyes are half closed now, like she's looking at something far away. The entrance to a longhouse faces the village, not the rising sun like ours, and it's covered with a heavy hide or sometimes a woven mat made from corn husks, thick enough to keep out wind and rain even in the worst weather. When you step inside, her grandmother told her, the first thing you notice is the warmth, all those cooking fires, all those bodies, all that heat trapped under that curved bark roof. It's like stepping into a different world. Outside could be freezing rain and grey skies. Inside is warm and golden with firelight. The fires themselves burn in a row down the centre aisle, with each family tending their own flame. The smoke rises and mingles near the roof peak, drifting toward those adjustable panels, finding its way out through whatever gap has been left for it. On rainy days, the smoke hangs a little lower, the draft not pulling quite as strong, but it still moves, still finds a way. And the bark walls, they don't just shed water, they hold in heat too. That thick elm bark, layered and overlapped, it creates a barrier that keeps the warm air inside and the cold air out. Same principle as your teepee's ozan, really. Trapped air is the best insulator there is. Your grandmother opens her eyes and looks at you directly. Different materials, she says again. same wisdom. Her grandmother stayed with the Longhouse people for 2 moons, trading and learning and watching. She came back with stories that filled winter nights for years. Stories about women who owned the houses and passed them down to their daughters. Stories about councils held under those long bark roofs where important decisions were made by firelight. Stories about children playing in the centre aisle while rain drummed overhead. Those people, your grandmother says, they never worried about rain, not the way some people do. They built their homes to handle whatever the sky could throw at them, and then they went on living their lives. Sound familiar? You nod. It does. The fire needs more wood. Your father rises and selects a piece from the stack along the wall, placing it carefully to avoid scattering sparks. The flames catch the new fuel, brightening the interior for a moment before settling back to their steady glow. Running Fox has finally made it to the door flap. He pulls it aside and cold, damp air rushes in, carrying the smell of wet grass and rain-soaked earth. He grins back at the family, water already beading on his young face, and then he's gone. The door flap falls back into place. The warmth returns. Your grandmother watches the door for a moment, then turns back to her leather work. The story is over for now, but the knowledge stays with you, settling into your memory the way rain settles into the earth. Bark houses in the east. Hide houses on the plains, each one perfect for its place, its people, its purpose, and both of them dry. The door flap moves again. Running Fox is back already, water streaming from his hair, his outer garment dark and heavy with rain. He's laughing, though. Your brother always laughs in weather that would make other people miserable. He peels off the wet garment and hangs it on a peg near the fire. Steam starts rising almost immediately. In an hour, maybe less, it'll be dry enough to wear again. That's the magic of smoked leather. It doesn't fight the water, it just lets it go. But your grandmother is watching Running Fox with a particular look in her eye, the kind of look that means another story is coming. Not everyone wears leather in the rain, she says. Running Fox settles onto his sleeping platform, still grinning, water droplets caught in his eyebrows. He doesn't know what's coming, but you do. You've seen that look before. Far to the west, your grandmother says, past the great mountains, past the dry lands, there's a coast where it rains more than anywhere else. Not storms like this one that blow through and move on. Rain that falls for weeks, months even. Grey skies from one moon to the next. A world made of water. She picks up her leather work again, but her hands move slowly, almost absently. Her mind is somewhere else. The people who live there, the ones who fish for salmon and hunt whales in the great water, they don't use leather to stay dry. Can't. Leather works on the plains because eventually the sun comes out and things can dry. But on that western coast, the sun hides for so long that leather would rot before it ever dried properly. So they use something else, something that grows all around them, thick and tall and red as sunset. Cedar. Your mother looks up from the berries she's been sorting. Cedar bark? Her voice carries a note of curiosity. She's heard pieces of this story before, but like all good stories, it changes slightly with each telling. Cedar bark, your grandmother confirms. The inner layer, soft and flexible, stripped from the trees in long sheets and processed until it becomes almost like cloth. Then woven into capes and hats that shed water the way a duck sheds water from its feathers. Running Fox is interested now despite himself. He leans forward, elbows on knees. How does bark become cloth? Your grandmother smiles. That's the question, isn't it? The women of those coastal villages, she says, they're weavers, not like the basket weavers here on the plains, though that's a skill too. These women weave fabric from tree bark. It takes patience you can barely imagine. First, they strip the bark in spring when the sap runs and the layers separate easily. The outer bark gets discarded. It's the inner bark they want, the part that's soft and fibrous, the colour of dried salmon. Then they soak it, days in water, sometimes longer, until the fibres start to separate on their own. Then they pound it with wooden mallets over and over, breaking down the structure until what was once rigid bark becomes soft and pliable. The fibres get separated by hand, pulled apart strand by strand, sorted by thickness and quality. The best ones go to the finest garments. The coarser ones become everyday wear. Nothing gets wasted. Your grandmother pauses, adjusts her position against the willow backrest. Outside, the rain continues its steady rhythm. You've stopped noticing the sound unless you focus on it. The weaving itself, she continues, that's where the real skill comes in. Those cedar fibres get worked into a fabric so tight that water can't find a way through. Not waterproof exactly, not like pitch-sealed bark, more like water-resistant. The drops hit the surface and roll off before they have time to soak in. She makes a gesture with her hands, fingers interlacing, showing how the fibres lock together. A single cape might take a moon to weave, she says, maybe longer for the finest ones. The women work at it every day, fingers moving in patterns learned from their mothers who learned from their mothers back through more generations than anyone can count. And the cedar itself, it has oils in it, natural oils that help repel water even before the weaving makes it tight. Those coastal people figured that out thousands of years ago. They didn't just grab any plant fibre that was handy. They experimented, tried different trees, different grasses, different techniques, and they discovered that cedar bark worked better than anything else. The smell of those capes, my grandmother said it stayed with you, that sharp, clean cedar smell. She met traders once who had come from the coast, and she said you could smell them before you could see them. Not a bad smell, just different. The smell of a whole other world carried in their clothing. And the shape matters too. The capes aren't flat like a blanket thrown over your shoulders. They're built with layers, especially around the shoulders where rain hits hardest. Multiple thicknesses of woven bark, each layer overlapping the one below, creating a surface that works like roof shingles. Water hits the top layer, runs down to the next, runs down to the next. By the time it reaches the bottom edge, it's falling to the ground instead of soaking through to your skin. The hats are the same idea, but smaller. Tall cones woven from the same cedar bark, fitting snug on the head, keeping the rain out of your eyes and off your face. A good hat and cape together, your grandmother says, and you can work outside all day in the heaviest rain without getting truly wet. She pauses, remembering something else. The women wear those capes while they gather shellfish from the rocks at low tide. The men wear them while they paddle their great canoes out to fish. Children wear smaller versions made for their bodies, learning from their first steps that rain is just part of life. And when they come home, they hang those capes near the fire to dry, same as Running Fox is doing with his leather right now. The cedar fibres release their moisture slowly, and by morning everything is ready to wear again. The capes wear out eventually, of course. The fibres break down after a few seasons of constant use, but the skills don't wear out. A grandmother teaches her granddaughter, and the knowledge continues. New capes get woven to replace old ones, and the cycle goes on. Running Fox looks sceptical. He's a plains boy, used to leather and hide. Bark doesn't seem like proper clothing material to him. Your grandmother catches his expression and laughs. Her laugh is like creek water over stones, quiet and musical. I know, she says, bark clothing sounds strange to you, but think about it. What do those coastal people have plenty of? Cedar trees taller than 10 men, standing on each other's shoulders. Forests so thick you can barely walk through them. More bark than they could ever use. And what do they not have? Buffalo, Elk in the numbers we see them, the great herds that give us everything we need, so they work with what they have. Same as us, same as everyone. Your father speaks up for the first time in a while. His voice is thoughtful. The best solution is always the one that uses what's around you. Your grandmother nods. Exactly. A cedar cape would be useless here on the plains. The bark would dry out and crack in our summer sun. It would freeze brittle in our winters. It's made for a place where moisture is constant, where the air itself is damp. Just like our smoked leather would be wrong for that coastal climate. It would never fully dry. It would mildew, fall apart, become useless in a season. Different places need different answers. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. The coastal people, your grandmother adds, they don't just endure the rain, they live in it. It's part of who they are, the way the open sky and endless grass are part of us. Their villages sit right at the edge of the great water, where rivers full of salmon empty into the salt. The rain feeds those rivers, keeps them flowing, keeps the fish coming back year after year. Without the rain, there would be no salmon. Without the salmon, those people couldn't survive. So they don't curse the rain the way some might. They accept it, work with it, build their whole lives around the fact that water falls from the sky more days than it doesn't. Their houses are made of cedar planks, split from those same massive trees that give them bark for clothing. Steep roofs that shed water quickly. Overhanging eaves that keep the rain from running down the walls. Everything designed for a world where dry days are the exception, not the rule. My grandmother said the sound of rain on a cedar plank house was different from rain on bark or hide, deeper somehow, more musical, like the house itself was singing along with the storm. Laughing water stirs in her sleep, mumbles something that might be words, then settles again. The fire has burned down some, casting longer shadows across the Ozan's painted surface. There's another material those coastal people use, your grandmother says, her voice dropping slightly lower as if sharing a secret. Not cedar bark this time, grass. Grass? Your mother sounds surprised. Some of them, the ones who live where cedar doesn't grow as tall, they weave capes from certain kinds of grass. Long stems, dried and processed and woven in those same overlapping layers. The principle is identical. Shed the water before it can soak through. She gestures toward the grass that pokes up through the entrance area where the ground cover is thinner. Not grass like this. Special grass, the kind that grows tough and long and holds together when woven tight. My grandmother said she saw a grass cape once brought by traders from the far west, said it was beautiful, golden-coloured with patterns worked into the weaving that told stories about the family who made it, and light, much lighter than leather. You could wear it all day and forget it was there. The rain outside seems to be shifting again, the rhythm changing, still falling but differently somehow. Maybe the wind has changed direction. Maybe the storm is finally starting to think about moving on. Your grandmother stretches her old fingers, works them back and forth to keep them limber. The leather piece she's been working on sits forgotten in her lap. The point of all these stories, she says, looking around at her family gathered in the warm, dry teepee, is not that one way is better than another. Bark capes, grass capes, smoked leather, none of them is the right answer for everyone. The point is that everywhere, in every place where people live, they figured out how to handle the rain. They looked at what grew around them, what animals lived nearby, what materials they could gather and process and shape with their own hands. And they found solutions. Thousands of different peoples across this whole land, thousands of different climates and terrains and challenges, and all of them, every single one, worked out how to stay dry enough to survive. That's what humans do. We solve problems, we adapt, we learn from the world, and we teach our children, and the knowledge passes down through generations like water flowing from mountain to sea. She reaches out and touches your hand. Her skin is dry and warm, thin as old leather. That's why I tell you these stories. Not because you'll ever need to weave a cedar cape, you won't. Not because you'll live in a longhouse made of bark, you won't do that either. I tell you because someday you might face a problem no one has solved before, and when that day comes, you'll remember that problems can be solved, that somewhere, somehow, there's always an answer waiting to be found. The fire crackles. Running Fox has fallen quiet, lost in thoughts of his own. Your mother resumes sorting berries, the soft sound of dried fruit against bark mixing with the rain's steady voice. Your grandmother picks up her leather work again, and this time her fingers move with purpose. The story is over, the teaching is done, but the knowledge lingers in the air like wood smoke, seeping into everything it touches. Outside, the storm rolls on, somewhere far to the west, past mountains you've never seen, past forests you can only imagine. People in woven capes are walking through their own rain, dry beneath roofs of cedar bark. Somewhere to the east, in those great longhouses, families are gathered around their fires, bark walls shedding water as they have for generations. And here, in the centre of the plains, under a cone of smoked buffalo hide with its clever ozan and its self-sealing seams, you sit with your family and listen to the rain and feel something like gratitude for the teepee that keeps you dry, for the grandmother who keeps you wise, for the knowledge flowing through time like an endless river. The afternoon is wearing on, though you can't see the sun to mark its passage. The grey light filtering through the smoke hole has shifted slightly, angling differently against the walls. Running Fox's wet garment is already half dry, steam rising more slowly now. Soon, he'll want to go back out again. He can't help himself. The storm calls to something wild in him. But for now, he sits quietly with the rest of you, part of a circle that has gathered in this same formation for countless generations. Family around a fire, stories in the air, rain on the roof and warmth within. It's a good way to spend a stormy day, maybe the best way. Your grandmother sets down her leatherwork and closes her eyes, not sleeping, just resting. She's old, and the telling of stories takes something out of her, even as it gives something back. The rain speaks its own language against the hide walls, a constant whisper that never quite stops, never quite becomes silence. You've heard it your whole life. Your grandmother heard it her whole life. Your children will hear it too. And somewhere in that sound, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the voices of all those other peoples, all those other solutions, all those thousands of ways that humans have found to answer the same simple question. How do we stay dry when the sky wants us wet? The answer, it turns out, is everywhere, written in bark and leather and woven grass, passed down through grandmothers and mothers and daughters, living in the hands of every person who ever stripped cedar bark or smoked a hide or stitched a seam with sinew. The rain doesn't know any of this. It just falls, same as it always has, same as it always will. But the people beneath it, they know, they remember, they teach. And the knowledge keeps them dry. The fire pops. A small shower of sparks spirals upward toward the smoke hole, orange against grey, alive for just a moment before winking out. Your father leans forward and adjusts one of the logs, pushing it deeper into the coals. It's an absent gesture. The kind of thing he's done 10,000 times without thinking. But this time you find yourself watching his hands, watching the way he reads the flames, understanding something you hadn't understood before. Fire is life. Not in some poetic sense, though it's that too. In a real, practical, you will die without it sense. Out here on the plains, in weather like this, fire is the difference between surviving the night and not surviving it, and keeping fire alive when rain falls for days on end. That's not as simple as it sounds. Your father catches you watching and something passes between you. Recognition maybe, an acknowledgement that you're old enough now to understand things that children don't need to know. Want to hear something, he says, his voice quiet so as not to wake your grandmother who has drifted into actual sleep, her breathing slow and even. You nod. He settles back, but his eyes stay on the flames. When I was younger than your brother, he says, maybe 5 winters old, we nearly lost our fire. 3 days into a storm worse than this one. The wood got wet, the tinder got wet, everything got wet. His jaw tightens at the memory. My father worked for hours, trying to coax a spark from wet wood, trying to find anything dry enough to catch. The rest of us huddled under blankets, getting colder and colder. My mother held me against her body to keep me warm. What happened? Your voice comes out softer than you intended. A neighbour. Old woman named Crow Feather. She came through the storm with a coal wrapped in dried fungus, carried in a clay pot against her belly to keep it alive, walked through rain that would drown a fish, all to bring us fire. He shakes his head slowly. That's when I learned. Fire isn't just something you have, it's something you protect, something you guard like you'd guard your children, because without it, you have nothing. The lesson stuck with him. You can see it in the way he tends these flames now, the careful attention he pays to the fuel supply stacked along the inner wall, protected from any drips by the ozan. Never too much wood on the fire at once, never too little, a steady burn that can last through the longest night. But keeping the fire burning inside the teepee is only part of it. The harder challenge is what happens when you have to travel. Storms like this one, they can last a week, sometimes longer, and sometimes you can't just wait them out. Maybe the buffalo have moved and you need to follow. Maybe enemies are approaching and you need to flee. Maybe the river is rising and your camp will flood if you don't relocate. Whatever the reason, sometimes you have to pack up and move, rain or no rain. And when you do, you have to take your fire with you. Your father reaches into a pouch at his belt and pulls out something small, something you've seen before but never really looked at closely, a bundle wrapped in soft leather, no bigger than his fist. Tinder, he says, dry tinder, the most valuable thing I own. He unwraps it carefully, revealing a ball of fibrous material, pale and fluffy. You recognize it now. The inner puff from certain seed pods mixed with shredded bark from a tree that fell and dried before the rot could reach it. This stays dry no matter what, your father says. Under my clothes, against my skin, body heat keeps any dampness away. If everything else fails, if the whole world turns to water, I can still start a fire with this. The collecting of tinder, he explains, that happens on good days. Dry days. Days when the sun shines and the wind blows and everything crispy crumbles at a touch. Those are the days you gather what you'll need for the wet times ahead. He points toward a leather bag hanging from one of the teepee poles, high up where no splash could reach it. In there, we've got enough tinder for maybe 10 fires, different kinds, the cattail fluff that catches a spark faster than anything, the shredded inner bark of cottonwood that burns slow and steady, the dried fungus from dead birch trees that holds a coal for hours. Your mother looks up from her berry sorting. I gathered most of that, she says. Last moon, during that hot spell, 3 days of walking, filling bags, 3 days of work so the family could survive 3 weeks of rain. That's the math of it. That's what preparedness costs. He wraps the tinder bundle back up with the same care he'd use handling a newborn and tucks it away. But tinder is only half the problem. The other half is spark. You know about friction fire, the bow drill and hand drill that your people use when they need to create flame from nothing. But those methods need dry wood, dry conditions, dry hands. In a storm like this one, friction fire is nearly impossible. So we don't try, your father says. We carry fire instead. He gestures toward a covered clay pot sitting near the back of the teepee, tucked behind a stack of parfleche containers. You've seen it before, always in the same spot, never opened. You thought it was for storage. Go ahead, he says. Look inside. You cross the teepee carefully, stepping over sleeping, laughing water, and crouch beside the clay pot. The lid fits tight, sealed with some kind of dried pitch. You work it loose and a smell hits you, thick and ancient. Ash, old smoke, something deeper, earthier. Inside, nestled in a bed of grey ash, sits a piece of something that looks like dried fungus. Bracket fungus, the kind that grows on the sides of dead trees, and in the centre of that fungus, barely visible, a tiny orange glow. That's been burning for 6 days, your father says. Since before this storm started, you stare at it. A coal, a living coal, kept barely alive in its bed of ash, fed just enough air to smoulder but not enough to flame, waiting. The fungus is the key, your father explains. Bracket fungus, the kind that grows shelf-like on dead trees. It catches fire easily, but burns incredibly slow. A piece the size of your thumb can smoulder for half a day without going out. He reaches past you and adjusts the coal's position slightly, a gesture so practiced it looks casual, but you notice how carefully he does it, how gently. The ash around it, that's important too. Ash holds heat but blocks too much air from reaching the coal. Just the right depth and the coal can rest without burning itself out. Too shallow and it flames up, consumes the fungus, dies. Too deep and it smothers. We call it the sleeping fire, your father continues. It can live in that pot for days if you tend it right. Add a little dried fungus when it starts to fade. Open the lid just enough to give it breath. Keep it warm against your body when you travel. He's moved to sit beside you now, looking down at the tiny glow with something like affection. When we break camp tomorrow, if the rain is still falling, I'll carry this against my chest, wrapped in leather, held close. The coal will sleep while we walk, dreaming whatever coals dream about. And when we make camp again, I'll wake it up. How? Gently. Add tinder a little at a time. Blow softly, like you're breathing life into it. Because you are. The sleeping fire just needs to remember that it's fire. He reaches out and closes the lid, sealing the coal back into its dark little world. Your grandmother, your mother, even your Uncle Grey Horse, they all carry their own sleeping fires when we travel. Different containers, different methods, but the same idea, redundancy. If one coal dies, another survives. We never trust our lives to a single flame. It's a responsibility that gets passed down, he adds. When you're young, you watch. When you're old enough, you're given your own fire to tend. And by the time you have children of your own, keeping fire alive is as natural as breathing. Running Fox has been listening from across the teepee, his earlier restlessness forgotten. How do you know when it's dying? Experience, your father says. You learn the signs, the way the glow dims, the way the ash settles. After enough years, you can feel it, like feeling a heartbeat. He looks at Running Fox with an expression you haven't seen before. Serious, assessing. Next storm, he says, I'll teach you, give you a sleeping fire of your own to tend. You're old enough to learn. Running Fox sits up straighter, trying not to look too pleased, failing. The fire in front of you, the one that's been burning for 3 days now, it crackles and shifts. Your mother adds another piece of wood, keeping the steady burn going. She doesn't need to be told. She's been tending fires since before you were born. And suddenly, you see it differently. Not just flames and heat and light. A living thing passed from hand to hand, pot to pot, generation to generation. A chain of fire stretching back thousands of years to whoever first figured out that coals could sleep and wake again. Your father stands, stretches, moves toward the door flap to check the weather. Grey light and rain smell flood in for a moment before he lets the flap fall. Still coming down, he reports, but lighter now. Maybe it'll break by tomorrow. Maybe, and if it doesn't, you'll pack up the teepee and carry sleeping fires against your bodies and walk through the rain until you find a new place to camp. Then you'll wake those coals, build new flames, pitch a new teepee. The fire will continue because fire doesn't care about weather. It just needs fuel and air and someone who knows how to keep it alive. Your people have been providing those three things for longer than memory reaches, in good weather and bad, in storms and sunshine, through winters that froze rivers solid and summers that baked the grass brown. Fire has been there through all of it, sleeping when it needed to sleep, burning when it needed to burn, passed down like knowledge, like stories, like the ozan and the sinew stitching and the smoked leather that never grows stiff. The rain continues outside, gentler now, but still steady. Inside, the fire burns, your grandmother sleeps, your family waits, and somewhere in that clay pot a coal dreams of becoming flame again. Your father has settled back against his willow backrest, but his eyes keep drifting to the fire, checking, always checking. It's a habit so deep it probably continues even in his sleep. There's a word your grandmother uses sometimes. She says fire is the first gift, the thing that separated your ancestors from the animals, that let them survive cold, that would kill any creature without fur, that let them cook meat and stay healthy, see in darkness, keep predators at bay. Without fire, she says, we would never have become who we are. And maybe that's why your people guard it so carefully, not just because fire means warmth and cooked food and light, but because fire is memory, fire is identity, fire is the thread that connects you to every ancestor who ever lived. The coal in that clay pot, it came from a fire that came from another fire that came from another, and on, back through time. Who knows how far, maybe all the way to the first flame ever lit by human hands. Your mother rises and moves toward the cooking area, her movements quiet so as not to disturb your grandmother's sleep. She takes some of those sorted berries and begins mixing them with strips of dried meat and rendered fat, pemmican, travel food that lasts for months without spoiling. She works close to the fire, using its light but also its warmth. Her fingers move quickly despite the dim afternoon grey. She's made this food 1,000 times before. Fire makes it possible. Fire dried that meat in the first place, smoking it until the moisture was gone and no rot could take hold. Fire rendered that fat from buffalo bones, heating it until it ran liquid and clean. Fire will warm the finished pemmican tonight, softening it enough to eat. Everything circles back to flame. Laughing water stirs, makes a small sound, settles again. She's dreaming, her small hands twitching. Dreaming about what? Horses maybe, or the dolls your mother made her from scraps of hide, or the stories she's absorbed without knowing, the ones that seep into children's minds like water into earth. The rain outside has definitely lightened. You can hear individual drops now instead of the constant wash of sound that marked the storm's peak. Not stopping yet, but thinking about it, considering. By morning maybe, or the morning after. The sky will clear eventually. It always does. And when it does, the fire will still be burning, passed from sleeping coal to waking flame, from one campsite to the next, carried in clay pots against warm bodies through whatever weather the world decides to throw. That's the gift. That's the trick. That's the answer to the question the rain keeps asking. How do you survive when everything is wet? You carry fire, you protect fire, you treat fire like the family member it's become over 10,000 years of partnership. And fire, in return, keeps you alive. The afternoon slides toward evening, the grey light dims, the flames burn on, and in the growing darkness you feel something shift inside you, an understanding that wasn't there this morning. Fire isn't just useful. Fire is sacred, not in a way that means you worship it, but in a way that means you respect it. You respect what it gives. You respect what it costs to keep. You respect the generations of knowledge that taught your people how to carry flame through rain, through snow, through every obstacle the world could create. Your father's eyes meet yours across the teepee. He nods, just slightly. He sees the understanding in your face. Welcome to the family of firekeepers, that nod says. It's a responsibility you'll carry forever. The rain whispers against the walls. The coal sleeps in its clay pot. The flames dance their endless dance, and you sit in the warm, dry centre of it all, feeling the weight of 10,000 years settle gently on your shoulders. Running Fox's moccasins are dry now, completely dry, sitting by the fire where he left them hours ago. He picks one up and turns it over in his hands, checking the sole, testing the leather's flexibility. Still soft, he announces, to no one in particular, just like new. Your mother glances over from her pemmican work and smiles. That's the point. Running Fox pulls the moccasins on, wiggling his toes inside. The leather hugs his feet like a second skin, already warm from sitting near the flames. He could walk out into the rain right now, soak them completely, and in an hour they'd be dry again. That's not an accident. That's design. Your Uncle Greyhorse has been quiet most of the afternoon, working on something in his corner of the teepee. Now he looks up, his broad face thoughtful. You know why we don't try to make moccasins waterproof? Running Fox shrugs. Because we can't? Greyhorse shakes his head. Because we're smarter than that. He sets aside whatever he was working on and leans forward, settling into the posture of a man about to explain something important. Think about it. You could treat moccasins with grease and pitch until they sealed out every drop of water, make them tight as a drum, waterproof. Sounds good, right? Running Fox nods. Wrong. Greyhorse's voice carries the authority of someone who learned this lesson the hard way. Waterproof means water can't get in, but it also means water can't get out. Your feet sweat. Everybody's feet sweat. Seal that moisture inside and you've got a different problem. Wet feet from the inside instead of the outside. And wet feet, your father adds from across the fire, mean blisters, infections, frozen toes in winter, dead men. Greyhorse nods. The Europeans, when they first came here, they wore those stiff leather boots, sealed tight with wax and stitching. Took them a whole day to dry out when they got wet, and inside their feet were rotting while they walked. He makes a face like he's smelling something bad. Our moccasins, they breathe. The leather lets air through, lets moisture escape. Your feet stay drier because they can actually dry themselves. And when the outside gets wet, the whole thing dries in less than an hour by a good fire. Running Fox looks down at his feet, seeing his moccasins differently now. The trade-off, Greyhorse continues, is that yes, your moccasins will get wet when you walk through rain or streams or morning dew, but so what? They'll be dry again before you've finished your next meal. The smoked leather, it doesn't care about getting wet. It dries soft every time. No stiffening, no cracking, no changing shape. Your mother sets down her pemmican work and picks up a pair of moccasins from the pile of items waiting to be maintained. Her moccasins, the ones she wears every day. Feel this, she says, handing them to you. You take them. The leather is impossibly soft, almost like cloth. You can bend them in half, roll them up, twist them into shapes that would crack any European boot into pieces. And yet they're strong. You've seen your mother walk miles in these, over rock and thorn and frozen ground. 20 winters old, she says. Same pair. I've replaced the soles twice, patched a few holes, but the uppers, the main body, that's the original leather I made when I was about your age. She takes them back, handling them with the casual confidence of long ownership. The secret is in the smoking, same as everything else. And in using them right. Dry them every night, even if they're barely damp. Oil them occasionally with a little grease. Replace the grass lining when it gets matted down. She turns one moccasin over, showing you the sole. See how thin this is? A European would say it's not enough protection. They'd want thick leather, stiff leather between their feet and the ground, but thick leather holds water. Thick leather takes forever to dry. Thick leather numbs your feet, so you can't feel what you're walking on. These, she says, flexing the thin sole, these let me feel every stone, every root, every change in the ground. I walk better because I can feel where I'm stepping, and yes, they wear out faster, so I make new soles. It takes an afternoon, better than ruining my feet in heavy boots that never dry. Grey Horse makes a sound of agreement. The traders laugh at our moccasins sometimes, say they're flimsy, say they'd fall apart in a real European winter. He shrugs. Then the traders get caught in a river crossing and spend 3 days with rotting feet while their boots dry out. And suddenly our flimsy moccasins don't seem so funny. Grass lining, Running Fox is paying attention now, the way he always does when practical skills are being discussed. Your mother nods. Dried grass, stuffed inside the moccasin. It cushions your foot, keeps it warm, and most importantly, absorbs moisture. When your feet sweat, the grass soaks it up. When the moccasin gets wet from outside, the grass holds that water away from your skin while everything dries. She gestures toward a bundle near the wall. I change the grass every few days. Old grass goes into the fire, new grass goes into the moccasins. Takes a minute, keeps my feet healthy. Grey Horse is nodding along. The lining is the part most people don't think about, he says, but it's the part that makes everything else work. Without it, you're just wearing leather bags on your feet. He pulls off one of his own moccasins to demonstrate. Inside, you can see a layer of dried grass, still fluffy despite a day of use. He presses it with his thumb, and a tiny bit of moisture darkens his skin. See, absorbed throughout the day. Tonight I'll replace it with fresh grass. Tomorrow my feet will be dry and comfortable from the first step. The rain continues its gentle patter outside. The evening light has grown dim enough that the fire provides most of the illumination now. Shadows dance on the ozan as the flames move. Your grandmother has woken, though she hasn't moved from her resting position. Her old eyes are open, watching the conversation, a slight smile on her weathered face. Tell them about the containers, she says. Her voice is soft from sleep, but still clear. Tell them how we keep things dry when the whole world is wet. Grey Horse stretches, his joints popping audibly. The containers, right. He reaches behind him and pulls out a puff flesh. One of the stiff, rawhide envelopes that holds so much of your family's belongings. This one is painted with geometric designs in red and yellow, patterns that identify it as belonging to your household. Rawhide, he says, untanned hide, dried stiff in the sun, not soft like our clothing, hard like wood, and nearly waterproof. He runs his hand over the surface, showing how the painted designs create a slight texture. Water hits this and beads up, rolls off. The hide is so dense, so tight that moisture can't penetrate. We use these for storing anything that has to stay dry. Dried meat, tinder, medicine herbs, extra clothing. The making of a parfleche, he adds, that's a skill in itself. You take a fresh hide, scrape it clean of flesh and hair, then stretch it in the sun until it dries hard. No tanning, no smoking, no brain treatment, just raw hide, cured by the air itself. Your mother nods. The painting comes next? Those designs aren't just decoration. The pigments, mixed with fat, they add another layer of water resistance. Every line of paint is another tiny barrier the rain has to get through. And the shape. Grey Horse continues, holding up the parfleche. See how it folds? Like an envelope. All the edges tuck inward. To reach the contents, water would have to run uphill, against gravity, around multiple corners. It just can't do it. He opens the parfleche to show the contents. Inside, wrapped in soft leather, are bundles of plant material you recognize as medicine stores. Completely dry despite 3 days of rain. The fold matters, he continues, resealing the container. See how the flaps overlap? Water would have to travel uphill to get inside, and the ties, they're pulled tight so no gaps can open up. Your mother has moved to a different part of the teepee, where several more containers are stored. She returns with a smaller one, darker in colour. This is birch bark, she says, from the northern forests. We trade for it sometimes. The bark itself is waterproof. The natural oils in it repel water completely. She opens the container, which is sewn together with some kind of fibre and sealed at the seams with dark pitch. Inside is a collection of seeds, the kind used for certain ceremonies. Birch bark containers can hold water if you make them right, she explains. Actually hold it, like a pot, so keeping things dry is easy. Grey Horse takes the container and examines the seams. Pine pitch, he says, pointing to the dark lines, boiled down and applied hot. It hardens into a seal that water can't break. The techniques overlap, he continues, overlapping materials like roof shingles, pitch, sealing the gaps, dense materials that naturally repel moisture. Fold the container so water has to fight gravity to get in. He hands it back to your mother. Every container we make follows these principles, different materials depending on what's available, but the same basic ideas. He gestures around the teepee. Look at how everything is stored. The parfleches stacked behind the ozan where drips can't reach them. The food bags hanging from poles where moisture falls away instead of pooling. The tinder bundle tucked against someone's body at all times. Nothing important is left where water could find it. Your mother picks up the buffalo stomach bladder that holds the family's drinking water. This is waterproof in the opposite direction, she says with a slight smile. Holds water in instead of keeping it out. Same materials, same careful work, different purpose. The bladder has been cleaned and treated until it's supple but strong. A wooden plug seals the opening, wrapped with sinew to keep it tight. When full, it holds enough water for the whole family for a day. We carry 2 of these when we travel, your mother continues. 1 for drinking, 1 for cooking. Even in the heaviest rain, we might not be able to find clean water. Streams turn muddy. Puddles aren't safe to drink. But what we carry with us, that's always clean. Always ready. Grey Horse nods. Storage is survival. Keep your food dry. Keep your fire materials dry. Keep your water clean. Manage those 3 things and you can wait out any storm. Your grandmother speaks again, her voice dreamy with memory. When I was young, we had a grandmother in our camp who could weave baskets so tight they held water. No pitch, no bark, just grass and reeds woven together until no drop could find a way through. She closes her eyes again. I never learned that skill. Wish I had. But the knowledge is still out there somewhere, held by someone who learned from someone who learned from someone. That's how it works. Laughing Water has woken too, disturbed by the conversation. She sits up, rubbing her eyes, and immediately moves to your mother's side. Your mother wraps an arm around her and pulls her close, continuing to work on the pemmican one-handed. Outside, the rain has diminished to almost nothing. Just occasional drops now, the storm finally exhausting itself after 3 long days. The evening air feels different, cleaner somehow, like the world has been washed and is waiting to dry. Tomorrow the sun might come out, the grass will be bent and heavy with water, but the earth will begin to firm up, the streams will run high for a few days, then settle back to normal. Life will resume its usual rhythms, but tonight, in the gathering darkness, the lessons continue to settle into your bones. Moccasins that get wet and dry fast instead of staying soggy, containers made from stiff hide and waterproof bark, grass linings that absorb moisture away from skin, pitch that seals every seam, folds that make water fight gravity, hundreds of small solutions, each one simple on its own but together forming a system that lets people thrive in conditions that would defeat anyone who hadn't figured out the tricks. Your people figured them out over generations, over centuries, over millennia, trial and error and careful observation and the passing down of knowledge from grandmother to mother to daughter. The fire burns lower now. Your father adds wood without being asked. The flames climb higher for a moment, then settle into a steady glow. And you sit there, surrounded by your family, by containers full of dry supplies, by moccasins that will be ready for tomorrow's walking, by all the accumulated wisdom of countless ancestors who lived and learned and passed on what they knew. The rain has stopped. You can hear it in the silence, the absence of that constant whisper against the walls. 3 days of storm ended. Tomorrow you'll step outside into a world washed clean, and your feet in their soft smoked moccasins with their fresh grass linings will carry you wherever you need to go. Dry, comfortable, ready, because that's what the knowledge is for. Not just surviving the rain, but being ready to move the moment it stops. The fire crackles softly in the darkness. Your family settles into the evening rhythms, the quiet activities that fill the hours between dinner and sleep. Your mother finishes the pemmican and stores it in a parfleche, safe from moisture. Your father checks the sleeping fire one more time, adding a pinch of dried fungus. Your grandmother hums something wordless, a song from her childhood that has no beginning and no end. And the moccasins sit by the fire, soft and dry, waiting for feet to fill them. Tomorrow you'll walk through a world made new by rain. The grass will sparkle, the streams will run fast and clear, the air will smell of wet earth and growing things. Your feet will carry you through it all, comfortable and dry, because your people learned a long time ago that the best footwear isn't the kind that fights water, it's the kind that makes peace with it. Same lesson, different form, adaptation, not resistance, working with the world instead of against it. The rain has stopped, but the wisdom continues. Morning arrives with birdsong, the first you've heard in 3 days. You wake to pale light filtering through the smoke hole, gold instead of grey. The fire has burned down to coals overnight, but warmth still radiates from the stone-ringed pit. Around you, the family stirs in the slow way of people who slept well and have no urgent reason to rush. Your father is already up, standing at the door flap, looking out at a world transformed. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. The quality of light says everything. The storm is over. You join him at the entrance, and what you see makes you catch your breath. The prairie stretches out under a sky so blue it hurts to look at. Every blade of grass carries diamonds of water sparkling in the early sun. The air smells new, clean, like the world just finished bathing. And everywhere, as far as you can see, the land is changed. Small streams have appeared where none existed before. Low spots have become ponds. The creek that runs half a mile from camp has swelled into something almost like a river, brown with mud and moving fast. Your father takes all this in with the measuring eyes of a man who has read landscapes his whole life. "We chose well," he says quietly. You know what he means. The camp sits on a slight rise, maybe 3 feet higher than the surrounding prairie. Not much, barely noticeable in dry weather, but those 3 feet made the difference between waking up dry and waking up underwater. Your Uncle Greyhorse appears at your shoulder, also surveying the changed land. He points toward a depression about 100 yards away, where you can see water still pooled. That's where the Crow family wanted to camp when we arrived here, he says. Remember, their grandmother thought the grass was better down there. You remember, your father had argued, politely but firmly, for this higher ground instead. The Crow family had moved their teepee to the lower spot. Grey Horse shakes his head slowly. They'll have spent the night in water, their bedding, their food stores, everything will be soaked. It's not said with satisfaction, more like sadness, a reminder of what happens when you read the landscape wrong. Your father steps back from the entrance, letting the morning light flood the teepee's interior, time for everyone to wake up. While your mother prepares breakfast and your grandmother slowly works the stiffness from her old bones, your father gathers you and Running Fox for what he calls a teaching walk. Grey Horse comes too, his broad presence reassuring as you step out into the wet world. The grass soaks your moccasins immediately, but you don't mind. They'll dry. That's what they're made for. Your father leads the way, moving across the prairie with the confident stride of someone who knows exactly where he's going. After a few minutes, he stops at the edge of that depression where the Crow family's teepee stands surrounded by muddy water. The family's already up working to salvage what they can. Their teepee covering is dark with moisture. Their belongings are spread on the wet grass, drying in the sun. One of the children is crying. The grandmother looks exhausted. Your father raises a hand in greeting but doesn't approach. This isn't a time for visiting. Instead, he uses the scene as a lesson. What do you see? He asks quietly. Running Fox answers first. They're wet. Yes, but why? Your brother thinks about it. The water collected here. Your father nods. This is a low spot. Not by much. A few feet, maybe. But in a storm like we just had, a few feet is everything. He gestures around the depression, tracing its edges with his hand. See how the ground slopes toward this point from all directions? Every drop of rain that fell on the surrounding prairie flowed downhill and ended up here, a bathtub with no drain. Grey Horse picks up the lesson. The grass here is thicker, he says, greener. That's what the Crow grandmother saw. She thought it meant good grazing for the horses, good camping. And she was right about the grass, your father adds. But she was wrong about why. The grass is thick because this spot stays wet longer after every rain. The water collects here and soaks in slowly. Good for growing things, bad for living things. He turns and starts walking again, leading you up a gentle slope to a flat-topped rise maybe 50 yards away. From here, you can see the whole prairie spread out below you. This is where we should have camped, your father says. If we'd had more choices, I would have picked this spot instead. He points to the ground beneath your feet. Feel that? Rocky underneath. The rain hits this ground and drains away fast. Doesn't pool, doesn't soak. By tonight this spot will be completely dry while that low area is still muddy. Running Fox is looking around with new eyes. But we camped over there, he says, pointing toward your teepee. That's not as high as this. Your father nods. It was a compromise. This hilltop is exposed. The wind hits it from every direction. In a storm with strong winds, our teepee would have taken a beating up here, maybe lost poles, maybe torn covering. So we chose the middle ground, high enough to avoid flooding, but low enough to get some protection from the wind. Grey Horse walks to the edge of the rise and points toward a line of low hills to the west. The storm came from that direction, he says. We knew it would. The clouds build over those hills and push east, so we put our camp on the east side of that little ridge. The ridge broke the worst of the wind for us. It's a lot to think about. Every campsite is a balance of risks. Too low, you flood. Too high, the wind beats you down. Too close to water, the river rises. Too far from water, you spend hours walking for every drink. Your father reads your expression and smiles. It gets easier, he says. After enough seasons, you start to see the land differently. The shapes that hold water, the slopes that drain it, the places where wind rushes and the places where it calms. It becomes like reading a friend's face. You just know. He leads you down from the rise, following a different route back toward camp. As you walk, he points out features you've never noticed before. See that line of darker grass? That's where water flows after heavy rain. Not a creek, just a path the water takes. You never want to camp across that line. Grey Horse adds to the lesson. Even if it hasn't rained in a month, that line tells you what happens when it does. The grass remembers. The land remembers. You just have to look. And there, your father continues, that cluster of old dead trees, the ground stays damp around them. Their roots hold moisture long after the surface dries. Looks like solid ground, isn't. He crouches and presses his hand to the earth near one of the dead trunks. Mud squeezes between his fingers. 3 days after a storm, he says, and still this wet. Camp here and you'll wake up in a bog. Your uncle points to a different type of terrain, a flat area covered with short, scrubby grass. That's caliche, he says, hardpan clay underneath. Water can't soak through it, just pools on top. Looks fine in dry weather, turns into a lake when it rains. Running Fox is taking all this in, his young face serious with concentration. How do you know all these things? Your father stands up, wiping mud from his hand onto his leggings. Mistakes, he says simply. Mine, my father's, his father's. Every piece of knowledge you're hearing came from someone getting it wrong first. He starts walking again, leading you around a low mound that rises barely above the surrounding prairie. Ant hill, he says, tapping it with his foot. The ants always build where drainage is good. If you're in a new area and you're not sure about the ground, look for ant hills. They've already done the work of figuring out where water won't pool. Grey Horse laughs. My grandfather used to say the ants are better at picking camps than most men. Running Fox is pointing at something now. What about over there? That looks good. He's indicating a sheltered spot at the base of a steep cutbank where the land drops suddenly toward a dry creek bed. Your father's face grows serious. That's a death trap. Looks protected, I know. But in a flash storm, water pours off the hills and rushes through that creek bed. Anyone camped there would be swept away before they could react. He pauses, making sure Running Fox is listening. 2 summers ago, a family of traders made that mistake, set up camp in a dry wash because it was sheltered from the wind. Storm came up fast that night. They never had a chance. The silence that follows is heavy. Running Fox looks at the innocent-seeming cutbank with new understanding. The land can kill you, your father says quietly. Not because it's cruel, because it follows its own rules. Water goes down, wind goes through gaps, cold settles in low spots. If you know the rules, you can work with them. If you don't, you become another lesson for the next generation. Grey Horse has been walking ahead, and now he calls back. Here's a good one. Come look. You join him at a spot where the ground rises slightly, surrounded on 3 sides by gentle slopes. To the west, a thicket of willows provides a windbreak. To the east, the land drops away toward the creek, far enough that flooding isn't a concern. If I were picking a camp, Grey Horse says, this would be my choice. High enough to drain, windbreak to the west, water within walking distance but not dangerous. Good sight lines in most directions. Your father walks the perimeter, testing the ground with his feet. Soil's sandy here, he notes, drains fast, and the willow thicket means there's water underground, so we could dig a seep well if the creek was too muddy. He nods slowly. This is a teaching spot. Remember it, when you're picking camps on your own, look for places like this. The sun has climbed higher now, warming the wet land, pulling mist from the soaked grass. Steam rises in thin wisps all across the prairie, making the world look dreamlike. You turn back toward your own camp, where your mother will have breakfast waiting. Your moccasins squelch with every step, but they're already starting to dry around the edges. By the time you eat, they'll be comfortable. By the time you pack up to travel, they'll be like they were never wet. The lesson walks with you, settling into your bones the way all the other lessons have settled. Where to camp, where not to camp, how to read the land like a language, understanding what it's telling you about water and wind and safety. Your ancestors learned these lessons the hard way over thousands of years, flooded camps and collapsed teepees and swept away families. Every disaster became a story, and every story became a warning, passed down through generations until it reached you here on this wet morning. Now you know. And someday you'll teach your own children, and they'll teach theirs, and the knowledge will flow forward like water finding its way downhill. Always forward, always finding a path, always reaching toward the future. Back at camp, breakfast is ready. Your mother has made a thick stew from dried meat and the last of the fresh roots dug before the storm. It's warm and filling, exactly what you need after a wet morning walk. While you eat, you watch the Crow family in the distance, still working to dry their belongings. Their grandmother is directing the effort, her voice carrying faintly across the prairie. She sounds tired but determined. They'll recover. They always do. But they'll also remember this lesson next time. They'll camp higher. Your grandmother sits beside you, eating slowly, her old eyes watching you watch the Crow family. You learned something this morning, she says. It's not a question. You nod. She sets down her bowl and looks out across the wet, sparkling prairie. The land teaches, she says, if you pay attention. Every hill, every valley, every patch of different grass, it's all telling you something. What happens when it rains, where the wind blows strongest, where the cold settles on winter nights. She touches your hand with her dry, warm fingers. Your grandfather, before he walked on, he could read land he'd never seen before. We'd travel to new country and he'd pick the perfect camp spot in minutes. I asked him once how he knew. He said the land told him. Your father is packing the teepee now, working with your mother and uncle to collapse the poles and roll the covering. The process is smooth, practiced, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. In an hour, maybe less, your home will be a bundle on a travois, ready to move. And when you make camp tonight, somewhere else on this endless prairie, the first thing your father will do is read the land, check the drainage, find the windbreaks, look for the anthills, choose a spot where water can't collect and wind can't destroy. All those skills, invisible until you need them. All that knowledge passed down through more generations than anyone can count. The sun climbs higher. The mist burns away. The prairie begins to dry, grass springing back from its flattened, rain-beaten state, reaching for the light. You finish your breakfast and stand to help with the packing. Your moccasins are dry now, soft and comfortable on your feet. Your clothes are dry. Your bedding, protected by the ozan all through the storm, is dry. Everything works. Everything connects. The teepee kept you dry. The moccasins let you walk through wet grass without worry. The containers kept your food safe. The sleeping fire travelled in its clay pot, ready to wake at tonight's campsite. And the knowledge of where to camp made all the rest of it possible. Without that knowledge, none of the other skills would matter. You could have the best teepee ever built, and it wouldn't help if you pitched it in a flood zone. The land comes first. The land always comes first. Your grandmother has risen too, moving slowly but steadily to gather her things. She pauses beside you, puts a hand on your shoulder. You see it now, she says, the way it all fits together. You do, You finally do, and as your family works to pack up camp to prepare for the next leg of whatever journey you're on, you feel something settle inside you. Not just knowledge, though there's plenty of that. Something deeper. Confidence. The quiet certainty that you can survive what the world throws at you because your people have spent 10,000 years learning how. The rain will come again. It always does. And when it does, you'll be ready. The travois is loaded. The horses are ready. Your family stands in a loose circle where the teepee stood just an hour ago, nothing left but a ring of pressed grass and the cold ashes of a fire pit. Your grandmother says a quiet prayer, words in the old language that you only half understand. Thanks, you think. Thanks to this place for sheltering you through the storm. Thanks to the land for being readable, for giving signs that kept you safe. Then your father clicks to the horses and you're moving. The prairie stretches out ahead, still wet but drying fast under the climbing sun. Steam rises from the grass in wisps and curls, the earth breathing out its moisture. Birds wheel overhead, celebrating the end of the storm, with songs that seem louder than usual, more joyful. You walk beside your grandmother, matching your pace to her slower stride. She doesn't speak at first, just moves through the wet grass with the careful steps of someone who has walked thousands of miles in her long life. Finally, she breaks the silence. You've learned a lot these past few days, more than I knew there was to learn. She smiles, that weathered face creasing into familiar lines. That's always how it is. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. It's like drinking from a river. You can swallow and swallow, but the water just keeps coming. She reaches down and plucks a stem of grass, still heavy with raindrops. This storm, she says, rolling the stem between her fingers, this was a gentle teacher. 3 days of rain, but nothing dangerous. No floods sweeping away camps, no lightning striking down horses, just water falling from the sky and your family staying dry beneath it. She hands you the grass stem. Other storms won't be so gentle. There will be times when everything goes wrong. The teepee tears, the fire dies, the creek rises faster than anyone expected. You'll face moments when all the knowledge in the world seems useless against what the sky is throwing at you. Her voice is soft but steady. When those moments come, remember this. Your ancestors faced worse. They faced ice that covered the land for generations. They faced droughts that lasted years. They faced storms that flattened forests and turned rivers into monsters. And they survived. Every single one of them survived long enough to have children who had you. That's what you come from. That's the line you carry forward. You roll the grass stem between your own fingers, feeling the water droplets break and run down your skin. The secret, your grandmother continues, is not that we're stronger than the rain. We're not. No one is. The secret is that we don't try to be stronger. We don't fight the water. We work with it. She gestures around at the walking family, the loaded horses, the endless prairie. Everything we do is about working with the world instead of against it. The teepee doesn't block rain, it sheds it. The moccasins don't seal out water, they dry fast. The containers don't fight moisture, they guide it away. Even choosing where to camp, that's not about conquering the land. It's about reading it, understanding it, finding the places where water goes and staying out of them. She stops walking for a moment, turning to face you fully. The Europeans who come here, some of them don't understand this. They try to build walls against the weather, try to force the land to be what they want, try to make water go where water doesn't want to go. She shakes her head slowly. Sometimes it works, for a while, but the land always wins eventually. The rain always finds a way. The only people who survive in the long run are the ones who learn to be part of things instead of apart from them. She pauses, looking up at the sky, that endless blue that has replaced yesterday's grey. The rain isn't our enemy, she says. It fills the rivers, grows the grass, brings the buffalo. Without rain, this prairie would be dust and death, so we don't curse it. We just learn to live with it, to let it fall and keep ourselves dry while it does. Your father calls a rest stop near a small creek, swollen from the storm but already clearing as the mud settles. The family spreads out to drink, to stretch, to check the loads on the travois. You find a dry rock and sit, looking back the way you came. Somewhere behind you is the campsite where you spent 3 days learning things you'll never forget. Somewhere ahead is tonight's camp, a spot your father hasn't chosen yet because he hasn't seen the land yet. But he will choose well. He always does. The creek makes a gentle sound as it flows past, water talking to stones in a language older than any words. You watch it for a while, thinking about how this same water fell from the sky yesterday, collected in tiny streams, joined together and now flows towards some distant river you'll never see. Water is always moving. Rain falls, soaks in, rises again as mist, forms clouds, falls again. An endless cycle that your grandmother says has been happening since the world was young and will keep happening long after everyone alive today has walked on to the next world. Your people are part of that cycle, not standing outside it, watching, part of it, like the grass and the buffalo and the birds overhead. That's what makes the knowledge work. Not tricks or cleverness or outsmarting the rain, just understanding that you're part of something bigger and learning how to fit. Your mother brings you a strip of pemmican, the travel food she made yesterday in the warm, dry teepee. You chew it slowly, tasting the berries and meat and fat, all of it preserved through techniques your people perfected over countless generations. She sits beside you on the rock, her presence comfortable and familiar. What are you thinking about? Everything, you say, all of it, how much there is to know. She nods, understanding. It felt that way for me too, at your age, like suddenly seeing a whole world that had been invisible before. She looks out at the prairie, the same view you've been watching. My mother taught me. Her mother taught her. Someday you'll teach your daughters, if you have them, or your nieces, or anyone willing to learn. The knowledge doesn't care who carries it, as long as someone does. She squeezes your shoulder and stands, moving off to help your father adjust one of the travois loads. But her words stay with you, settling in alongside everything else you've absorbed these past 3 days. Running Fox is playing at the edge of the creek, tossing pebbles and watching the ripples spread. Laughing Water sits with your grandmother, being taught something about the plants growing near the water. Your Uncle Grey Horse is checking the horse's hooves, making sure no stones have lodged in the soft ground. Everyone doing what they know how to do, everyone part of a system that works. You think about everything you've learned since the storm began, the brain-tanned leather that stays soft no matter how wet it gets, the sinew stitching that swells to seal its own seams, the ozan that catches drips and creates insulation, the longhouses of bark in the eastern forests, the cedar capes of the far western coast, the sleeping fires carried in clay pots against warm bodies, the moccasins with their grass linings, the parfleche and birch bark containers, the art of reading landscape like language. So many pieces, so many skills, so many generations of learning, and underneath all of it, holding it together like the poles hold up a teepee, one simple idea: don't fight what you can't beat. Find ways to flow with it instead. Your grandmother told you about the eastern peoples and their bark houses. Your father showed you the sleeping fire in its clay pot. Your uncle explained why moccasins that get wet are better than boots that stay dry. Your mother handed you a pair of soft leather shoes that have lasted 20 winters because they were made right and used right and cared for right. Each piece of knowledge came from someone. Each technique was invented by a person long ago who faced a problem and found a solution, and each solution was tested by time, refined by use, passed on to children who passed it on to their children. You're the latest link in a chain that stretches back further than anyone can count, and someday you'll add your own links, your own discoveries, your own small improvements to ancient ways. That's how knowledge grows, not in great leaps, but in tiny steps. A grandmother notices that certain bark sheds water better than other bark. A father realizes that campsites on the east side of hills stay drier than those on the west. A mother experiments with different grasses for moccasin linings until she finds the one that absorbs the most moisture. Thousands of observations, thousands of experiments, thousands of years. And all of it adding up to one simple truth. You don't defeat rain, you dance with it. The sun is warm on your face, the pemmican is rich on your tongue. The sounds of your family going about their tasks fill the air with comfortable noise. Tonight there will be a new camp, a new teepee raised in a new spot chosen for all the right reasons. Tomorrow there might be more travelling or maybe a longer stay if the hunting looks good. Next week, next month, next season, who knows? The only certainty is that the rain will come again. It always comes, and when it does, your people will do what they've always done. Build shelters that breathe, wear clothes that dry, carry fire in their hands, store food in containers the water can't touch, camp on ground the floods can't reach, live with the rain instead of against it. Your grandmother is walking towards you, her rest finished, ready to continue the journey. She stops beside your rock and looks down at you with those ancient eyes that have seen so many storms. You carry it now, she says. Everything I know, everything my grandmother knew, everything stretching back to the beginning, it lives in you now. She touches your forehead gently. Pass it on when the time comes. That's all we ask. Learn it, live it. Pass it on. Then she's moving again, joining the line of family and horses as your father calls everyone to continue. You stand, brush off your leggings and fall into step with the others. The wet grass bends under your feet and springs back behind you, leaving no trace of your passage. The sun climbs toward noon. The prairie stretches out forever in all directions. And somewhere behind you, already disappearing into distance and memory, a circle of pressed grass marks where you weathered a storm and learned how your people have been doing exactly that since time began. The rain will come again. You'll be ready. The story is ending now, the way all journeys eventually end. Not with fanfare or drama, but with quiet steps continuing forward, one after another, into a future that stretches out like the prairie itself. Whitebird walks with her family toward tonight's camp. The sun warms her face, the grass whispers against her dry moccasins, her grandmother's words echo in her heart like the memory of rain on a teepee roof. And you, listening to this story in your own warm bed, in your own dry room, you carry something of her now, something of all of them. The knowledge that people have always faced challenges, that storms have always come, that the sky has always found ways to test the creatures living beneath it, and that those creatures, the human ones at least, have always found ways to answer. Not by building higher walls, not by fighting harder, but by watching, learning, adapting, by noticing which bark sheds water best, by discovering that certain plants make fire last longer, by understanding that the world isn't an enemy to defeat but a partner to dance with. Your own roof keeps the rain out. Your own walls hold the warmth in. Your own bed cradles you in softness that Whitebird's grandmother could barely have imagined. But the principle is the same. Someone, somewhere, figured out how to solve a problem, and that solution was passed down, refined, improved, until it reached you here in this moment. You're part of the chain too, part of the long line of humans who learn and teach and keep the knowledge flowing forward. And now, as this story settles around you like a warm blanket, as the images of teepees and prairies and wise grandmothers fade into comfortable darkness, you can let yourself drift. Let the knowledge sink in. Let the rhythm of walking feet and falling rain become a lullaby. You're safe, you're warm, you're dry. Just like Whitebird in her teepee, just like the people of the Longhouse in their bark-covered homes, just like everyone who ever figured out how to live with the rain instead of fighting it. The creek near Whitebird's rest stop keeps flowing, water over stones, an endless gentle sound. Let that sound fill your mind now. Not the harsh drumming of storm rain, but the soft music of water finding its way home. Close your eyes if they're not closed already. Let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your blankets like the weight of a buffalo robe, holding warmth close. The storm outside your window, if there is one, can't touch you. The rain on your roof, if it's falling, is just a song the sky sings to help you sleep. You've learned the secrets now. You've walked with Whitebird through 3 days of rain. You've heard her grandmother's stories and her father's lessons and her uncle's practical wisdom, and now it's time to rest. Let the prairie fade. Let the teepee dissolve into comfortable darkness. Let everything go except the feeling of being safe, being warm, being dry. Sleep well. The rain will still be there when you wake, but so will everything you need to dance with